Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's episode of Paranormal Encyclopedia. I am, as always, your host, Kevin Mears, demonologist, paranormal investigator, and the Paranormal Encyclopedia. I am joined by...
Brian McKinley, author, paranormal writer.
Godfather
of vampire thrillers.
It's okay. It's that kind of the season. I swear I didn't hypnotize him.
He always has those moments.
It happens to all of us.
Yeah. Well, I've had those moments, too.
And in case any of you were wondering, remembering, or just had to ask yourself, it's Baron Voltage here. A small, medium, and large. Santa Baron, yes. You didn't see anything happen.
Turn that down.
Oh, I didn't even realize.
It's kind of interesting. We're having that kind of a night. Anyways, Baron Voltage, small, medium, and large, recreational hypnotist, and Santa Baron apparently tonight, but please don't sit on my lap, Kevin.
Not if you paid me.
Thank you, goodness. Well, actually, if you did, wouldn't I have to pay you come the 25th?
I mean...
We're not going there.
There you go. So, kind of a night.
We wanted to choose something appropriately festive and joyous, given how close we are to Christmas. So we're talking about the end of the world.
Huzzah.
Because what's more festive and joyous than the apocalypse?
Yes.
So that brings
Armageddon.
Us to our first sponsor of the evening, which is Audible. And I actually have a themed book to recommend.
Ooh.
So, for those of you who don't know, Audible is a great service where you can get audiobooks. $15 a month, you get a free you get an audiobook with that. Your audiobooks are yours to keep. If you cancel your subscription, you keep all your audiobooks.
Mm-hmm.
There are tens of thousands of titles. It's absolutely phenomenal.
Not just fiction.
But all of Brian's books are on there.
Mm-hmm.
Dacre's books are on there. Carrie Vaughn, who we had on recently, her books are on there. But the one I want to particularly point out tonight that Amisha and I have been listening to, although this is probably the 7th or 8th time I've gone through it, is Good Omens.
Wow.
For those of you who don't know Good Omens, Terry Pratchett, the author of the Discworld series, Rest in Peace, and Neil Gaiman, the author of Sandman and millions of other things,
American Gods,
got together and wrote a book about the end of the world.
Was it called Green Eggs and Ham?
No, it was called Good Omens. Keep up.
I got that. Good
Omens, the nice and accurate prophecies of Agnes Nutter, Witch. It is ridiculous. It's an enormous amount of fun. If you haven't listened to it or read it, I highly recommend it. And now's a good time to do it too, because coming in 2019, starring Michael Sheen and David Tennant, is Good Omens, the TV series.
Oh, dear goodness.
Scripts are being written by Neil Gaiman. They've got... It looks glorious.
Glorious.
I definitely recommend checking that out.
Yes.
So the first thing I wanted to get into tonight with the end of the world, because there's been a big thing people have been talking about over the last few years. I know a few conventions we've all been at have made a big deal over it, is... this guy by the name of Harold Camping, who made 3 that are well-known and several more that aren't so well-known predictions of the day that everything was definitely going to end.
And then didn't.
Yep. So he just changed the date.
Of course.
And it didn't happen again. And he changed the date again, and it didn't happen again. And finally, after the most recent time, which was a couple of years ago, I don't remember off the top of my head, I'm looking it up. Because I have a whole chart here of various failed predictions of the end of the world. The last time he predicted was October 21st, 2011.
1 year shy of when the Mayans said it would
happen. It didn't even line it up with the Mayan calendar.
He ain't a real apocalyptic individual.
Well, that was a big thing he had said, too, is the Mayans were slightly off. And obviously the Mayans were also completely wrong, given it's 2018.
Yeah.
Which is mostly because people didn't Okay. For anyone who's confused by all that, let me explain it real simple. The Mayan calendar is a wheel. Wheels don't end. You go all the way around, and you're just at the top. You can go all the way around again.
Yep.
Also, why? I never understood. It's like, so you take this society's end of their calendar, because they never actually said it was the end of the world.
Mm-hmm. No.
As deep, serious prophecy, yet they didn't even predict the end of their own civilization.
Yeah.
I think that they never really said that they had ended. They just basically dispersed for the most part. Because there are some people that can kind of trace.
There are still Mayan. as a civilization, it's largely gone.
Yeah.
There are still people of Mayan descent left in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, South America.
Mostly Mexico, I think.
Yeah, they had. I mean,
their empire was
majority,
predominantly Mexico, not South America.
They did kind of hit a little bit south, but yeah, for the most part, they
Central.
stayed on Mexico.
Yeah.
Or Central, that's what I meant.
Yeah, South and Central. Well, Mexico and Central America. And then, largely, I think they got mostly displaced by when the Aztecs took over.
Mm.
And then, but they are still around. They
invented the zero.
Here's the thing I want to point out about camping. He's famous for it because it's been very recent. And then there's the joking. I think everyone took his half-joking thing where people said Ragnarok was going to happen right around the same time.
There you go.
Which obviously also didn't come to an end. The world didn't come to an end then. On the other hand, another group that we were just talking about in the studio before we started that has an interesting history would be the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Now, it's not well known, even among Jehovah's Witnesses, but Jehovah's Witnesses were originally started by a man by the name of Charles Taze Russell. Mm-hmm. Charles Taze Russell, who, aside from having an interesting interpretation of Scripture, made looking at it, 5 separate predictions of the end of the world: 1878, 1881, 1914, 1918, 1925, and 1975. What's particularly fascinating, in my opinion, here is the very bizarre way that Jehovah's Witnesses took the 1914 prediction and ran with it. So, obviously, the world didn't end in 1914. We're all still here.
Yep.
Now, Jehovah's Witnesses said, well, it wasn't the end of the world. It was the return of Christ on earth. Christ came back to earth and set up his rulership invisibly.
We all missed it.
In 1914.
I just, every single time.
No, he came back. You missed it.
But it's okay because the actual final end hasn't happened yet.
Oh, good.
That's happening very soon, though. I mean, the original revised predictions in 1914 is that the end would come before the last of the generation that was alive in 1914 died. Well, I believe that's what they came up with after 1975 failed. But those people have largely died off.
Yeah.
And they keep trying to revise the prediction and go, oh, well, now it's going to be now. And lo and behold, the world isn't ending. Now, there's other serious issues with Jehovah's Witnesses. I don't want to necessarily make tonight all about that. Mm-hmm. For those of you who aren't aware, though, I will say real quickly, with all due respect to many individual Jehovah's Witnesses, the organization is extremely shady. If you don't believe me, look up the Australian Royal Commission and Jehovah's Witnesses. Right. Everybody very rightly talks about the Catholic Church covering up pedophiles. People aren't talking about the fact that Jehovah's Witnesses also cover up pedophiles.
Because they're so good at it.
Well, and people already see them as so strange and fringe.
Yeah. Well, there you go. You want to know what, though? I mean, if there is going to be an end, if anything, I consider every single time whenever there's a prediction happens that doesn't occur, it's like watching a trailer before the big movie. I think that's what's happening. We're all sitting in a theater. We're all waiting for it to show up. We see one sucky trailer after another sucky trailer. Oh, that one's going to be kind of cool. I can't wait for that one to happen. Another sucky trailer, another sucky trailer. Now we got a car commercial and another sucky trailer. That's what keeps happening. Yeah. That's what keeps happening.
Well, and that's the first thing I want to address, which is a favorite verse of mine about predicting the end of the world, which is from Matthew 24:36. Let's see. Here we go. But of that day and hour knoweth no man, not the angels in heaven, but my Father alone. In fact, if you go to other verses, even other translations of this verse, because what I read was the King James, not even Jesus knows the day that the end of the world is coming. Only God the Father knows. So, in my personal, I'm not a theologian, but for lack of a better word, my professional opinion, the minute you try to predict the day the end will come, you're already wrong.
Only God knows.
Yeah, and I'm not about to predict the end of the world. But there's something important did happen September of this year that does relate to one of the signs.
Oh.
Okay, so one of the most important things in all of Judaism, in the entire Hebrew culture, and it's actually very important to Christians as well, is the rebuilding of the temple.
Okay.
So, 63 AD, the Temple of Solomon that stood in Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans.
Damn those Romans.
The only thing that's left is what's now known as the Wailing Wall.
Okay.
Since 63 AD, one of the great goals of the Jews has been to rebuild the temple. To do that, and the reason why they haven't been, one of two main reasons they haven't been able to do that is it requires this very specific sacrifice. And the sacrifice is the blood of a pure red heifer. Now, let me be clear about why this is particularly so tricky. Red cows are not unknown. They happen. But that cow has to be so red, no more than 3 hairs on its body can be white. September of this year, a red cow was born. They haven't made the final decision yet, and it's a calf at this point. So it's going to be a while yet. But a cow was born that may fit the criteria. If it does, and if they choose to sacrifice it, the building of the temple is part of end times prophecy. It is incredibly important to the Jews. It's incredibly important to the Christians. There's one other giant stepping stone they have to deal with. Do either of you know what currently sits on the Temple Mount?
The Dome of the Rock.
Yes. The second most holy site in the entire world to the Muslim faith is the Dome of the Rock. It's in Islam, when Muhammad came to the end of his life, he was raised bodily into heaven just as Christ was. That's where it happened. In fact, as I understand it, I'm no expert on Islam, his footprints are still there.
Yes.
It's smack dab in the middle of the Temple Mount. To make it even more complicated, according to a lot of the plans for rebuilding the temple, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is also there.
Yep.
They'd have to bulldoze one of the most important sites in Christianity and most important sites in Islam to build the temple. Could they get away? I mean, could they maybe cut some sort of deal for Christianity? Possibly. If they bulldozed the Dome of the Rock, it'd be World War III easily.
Oh yes.
I am not an alarm. I am not a doomsday prophet. I am not saying that if they pull, there are other plans that actually allow the temple to coexist with the dome, which still is going to require political finagling with the local Muslims, but is certainly more realistic than we're going to destroy your temple and build our own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's.
I will say this: if they start to, if any extremist, and yes, there are Jewish extremists, decides to blow up that temple to get theirs built, there will be war in the Middle East on a level that we haven't seen in a long, since probably at least the 7-Day War.
At least. They're motivated.
Yes,
that's the scary part. I mean,
but here's the good news. Because again, I'm not an alarmist. There is good news. The good news is the Israeli government, as much there's plenty of legitimate political criticism that can be raised against the Israeli government. I'll be fair. I'll be clear. I am generally a supporter of Israel. I don't support everything they do because they do things on the Gaza Strip I don't approve of. But they are more politically savvy on this ground, if nothing else, than people give them credit for. During the 7-Day War, when Israel became a nation, they took the Dome of the Rock. It was held in Israeli hands. The government chose at the time to give it to the Muslims.
Yep.
Yeah.
Diplomacy is a thing.
Yeah. I'd be more concerned about extreme, and for that matter, not just Jewish extremists, but Christian extremists who want to see this happen too, doing something. The Israeli government is I'm going to assume, going to try and get the temple built. It's going to try to find a diplomatic way to get it done.
Good luck.
That's a whole other issue.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the tensions in the region have been still even strange. Just recently, there was 2 were killed over on one side of the bank.
Yeah.
Then in retaliation, another 2 got killed on the other side.
Yeah.
It's still kind of hot over there.
Which is why it's like, we've gone as far into the political morass that is. There's a lot as I'd want to go, but that is I thought a very significant situation of, hello, something just happened that is relevant to tonight's topic.
Yeah, it certainly fits the bill. I mean, there's always interpretation of signs, symbols, prophecy, one way or the other, that herald it and in some form. I mean, you've got the birth of what might be a pure red cow.
Yeah.
Yay. You know, we'll take a look at other Doomsday Cults for existence. We were talking about the Heaven's Gate.
Yes, they were convinced.
The presence of the Hale-Bopp comet.
Behind, specifically, it was that there was a UFO
ship.
behind Hale-Bopp, trailing Hale-Bopp comet containing Christ, and that by committing suicide, they were going to reincarnate onto this UFO to leave the solar system.
That's a heck of an Uber to try and catch.
Yeah.
For that matter, Jim Jones predicted the end of the world.
Yeah, but before even that point, he basically said, "You want to know what? They're coming to get us. Let's all off ourselves."
No, he predicted the prediction came first, and then eventually he went even further down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
For that matter,
So let's not wait.
what's the name of
No, it was called political suicide.
Radical suicide. Yeah. Basically, he saw it as a form of protest because of the fact that he opposed the U.S. government. For that matter, a very infamous cult from the 90s and early 2000s, Shinrinko.
Ah, yes.
I was just trying to look up the name of the guy who started it. There we go. Shoko Ashara, who was claimed to be the reincarnation of both Jesus Christ and the Buddha, and was convinced the world was going to end, and to help things along, they launched sarin gas attacks in the Tokyo subway.
And the cult's still going on.
Although they've divorced themselves from
Him.
Specifically. And while for obvious reasons they're so tightly monitored by the Japanese cult government, as I understand it, they actually have mellowed out. You know, they aren't. But keep in mind, and people don't necessarily realize this, but the Shinrinko wasn't just planning one attack. They had a whole series of attacks planned in the United States as well. For the older members of our audience, you may remember the trucks that would go around and spray for mosquitoes in the summers. Shinrinko was getting a hold of a bunch of them and was going to use them to distribute poison gas in the States, particularly on the West Coast. It didn't work. Also, one, it didn't work. They couldn't get everything together they needed. Two, realistically, it isn't a viable way to conduct a poison gas attack.
Right, because it disperses.
Yeah, ideal situations for gas attacks is something like the subway. It's a tight, confined space that's hard for people to get out of. Out in the wide open area, like through the trucks, wind's gonna blow it away. Weather becomes an issue. But the reality, and there's other cults out there. I mean, there's the Branch Davidians. From when you and I were kids, and probably a lot of our listeners. Although there's some interesting things there with how much of a doomsday prophet was, how much of it was things getting manipulated by the U.S. government. And Santa Baron is back.
Santa Baron is back, yes.
As we were just commenting on Branch Davidians and David Koresh.
Oh, dear goodness. I want to talk about somebody that was going Armageddon out of here left and right.
Less so than people think, because the government did actually manipulate. I'm not saying the guy was sane, but the government did manipulate some of the things he said to justify what they were doing.
Well, I mean, it wasn't so much, I think, I'm basing my observation and judgment upon the broadcast that he actually gave out publicly during the actual raid itself.
But the ones before that, the way that some of them were edited, who actually fired the first shots?
That's still up for debate. We have our opinions one way or the other. We'll leave it there. But I mean,
I'm not saying he was a saint. I'm not saying that the government was entirely in the wrong. Although there is a telling fact that the only automatic weapons that were found on the property belonged to government agents.
We're not going to get into that, Kev.
Yeah.
But I honestly think that whenever it comes to any particular type of extremist group, one way or the other, it almost seems to be a requirement to have some sort of an end of times prophecy And it's almost marketable if you think about it. Because what better way to make sure that people get in on your action quick and join up than saying, if you don't do it now, you're not going to get through the happy place intact if you're not with us. And it's going to be happening really soon, so act now while supplies last.
You're absolutely right. And the other thing I wanted to point out, if anybody's interested, you want to look at the whole list, because I'm just picking a couple of particular ones out. The list is enormous. But if you go to Wikipedia and look up list of dates predicted for apocalyptic events, they go back to 66 AD.
Yep.
And I mean, people were Jews were particularly convinced in the time of Christ that the end was coming, with everything that was going on with the Romans, which actually gets. I'm going to come back to that because it gets into some another interesting interpretation of Revelation nobody ever talks about, which is what's called So you have several ways of looking at Revelation. One is premillennialism, postmillennialism, mostly which deal with the idea of the rapture and when it's supposed to happen.
Right.
The one that nobody talks about is what's called the Peterist view. The Peterist view suggests that the book of Revelation isn't a prediction of the future. It's a figurative description of real events that were taking place during the reign of Emperor Nero.
So,
is that because of the whole beast?
Well, yes, that's one of the things.
Being Nero, and
so here's a big thing, and Brian actually hit on it and is 100% right.
okay,
The
Yay.
name, one of the most famous things about the apocalypse is, of course, the beast, aka the Antichrist, and we'll come back to this in a minute and why the Antichrist isn't quite technically the correct name. But the mark of the beast, a mark on the right hand or on the forehead,
Right.
that is 666 or 616. Scholars are unsure about which way it should be translated.
always seems to change.
But it specifically said that it's a number of a man and a number of his name. What most scholars agree, and I don't consider myself a scholar, but I certainly agree with them on this, is that it's a reference to what's known as grammatia, which is, it's a gross oversimplification to call it this, but the simplest explanation is it's Jewish numerology.
Ah, yes.
What you run into is in Jewish Kabbalistic traditions, so the mystical way of looking at the Bible, each letter of Genesis has multiple, not just does the text of Genesis have a meaning, but the Hebrew used has a meaning. The letters have a meaning. That meaning is partly in representing words. It's also partly in each letter has a number that it's associated with. So by applying this, supposedly, the idea is you get 666, just like anyone who knows about numerology these days, which is a number of forms are used. But you get the number based on your name, and then that tells you various interesting things about you. In Judaism, you get numbers from names, and Nero Caesar's full name in Hebrew, under grammatia, is 666.
All right.
Which is one of the biggest things. Now, there's a whole bunch of other things, because this is one of the things. I've been in a discussion on YouTube about the end of the world, and if anybody who's been part of the discussion is listening, and hello, because I've had to plug the show, obviously. But there's very specific prophecies made about the mark of the beast. And this is another thing I want to get into, because this is another thing people are constantly getting wrong. A few decades ago, people were convinced barcodes were the mark of the beast.
Oh, yes.
And it's very specifically that the white empty parts of barcodes, each of the three of those in each barcode, and each of those represents a 6.
Dear goodness.
The more recent one that came up, and why this discussion that started out about evolution and then turned into apocalyptic prophecy, was RFID chips.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And there is some logic to it. There are chips, a common place for them to be implanted, because people are doing it both for medical reasons and for social reasons and various other reasons.
Right.
Is in the forehead or in the right hand. Although for medical chips, looking it up, it's actually more commonly either the head or in the right arm, in the arm.
Yeah, there's
Around
more
the
meat
elbow.
in the arm, yeah.
Yeah. And even more importantly there, I think, technology is advancing with RFID chips so that they can be read from more of a distance, which means it may wind up anywhere in your body.
Right.
But the prophecy, the part of the prophecy that they think fits RFID chips, or for that matter, they thought would fit barcodes, is that it's a mark that you have to take on the hand or the forehead, without which you can't buy and you can't sell. So, barcodes obviously you can't sell much of most things, at least in a legitimate store, without a barcode on it. RFID chips, there is admittedly a move to move us towards a cashless society, and you put your banking information on the chip, and now you just have to wave your hand over a reader instead of having to dig your wallet out and all this stuff.
I prefer just hypnotize the cashier. I already gave you your money.
Which is one of many potential problems with this system.
Yeah.
The also reality is, right, I am not saying that somebody isn't trying to do the RFID banking thing, but it's never. I don't think it's going to be a requirement, like you have to do this for decades, if ever, just by virtue of the fact there are too many older Christians that will refuse on principle.
There's already a push for something like that on the roads, where there are some places that you have to have, like Easy Pass.
Yeah.
You can't pay cash anymore.
But that's a different thing, because it's
identifying.
not your car, but it's not your body.
But your car is yours and linked to you.
True, which is a whole political thing we can get into.
Yeah.
And again, we try to avoid politics, but this is specifically. I mean, if you read Revelation, it's specifically something on your right hand or your forehead, and there's ways to expand that somewhere on your body, but in your I'm skeptical about part of me wonders if the Peter's interpretation is right. I don't know for sure. I'm not making a definitive statement one way or the other. I'm nowhere near the scholar of prophecy I would need to be to say that. But I will say this. I'm inclined to think if it happens, it'll be an implant of some kind. But here's the critical point, I think, is a lot of Christians get this idea that people are just going to get duped. Oh, here, get this great new thing. Oops, you accidentally just took the mark of the beast. That, to me, is an incorrect understanding of the prophecy, given people with the mark of the beast are damned. There is no redemption for these people. In my personal opinion, this means it's going to be a conscious, knowing choice of there's Satan, there's God, pick a side.
Yeah.
But even more fundamentally than that, the prophecy itself says it's not just a mark without which you can buy or sell. It's a mark of loyalty to a political figure, the beast specifically. So if they mandate RFID chips tomorrow for banking, it still doesn't qualify because it's not linked to a political leader. It's not linked to a political. It's not a sign of loyalty to the U.S. government even. And also realistically, I hate to say this, for most of the scholars I've read, and my understanding of the interpretation of the prophecies, the U.S. is not going to be an important part of the end times.
It's a very self-centered view to believe that we are what is going to be the focal point. That's one of the reasons why I have issue with the Mormon faith a bit, mostly because it's like, really, Eden was in Branson, Missouri.
Which actually directly contradicts what the Bible says about Eden.
Yeah. Adam and Eve were from freaking Tennessee. Christ decided to come over to the New World. The reason why we have Native Americans is because he scorched them all? Yeah, no. No, I'm sorry. No. Nice people, good morality. No.
Lots of good charitable work too.
Yeah, I'll give them props plenty.
Yeah.
You want to? I mean, if you want to talk about people where their faith and their personality don't necessarily match up, take a look at the Church of Satan. All right, plenty of Satanists out there that are some of the most awesome people on the planet. I'm not talking about aesthetically one way or the other, but you're a bully, you're going to get mud stomped. You're an abuser, you're going to get mud stomped and then disappear.
Yeah, as I've said more than once, I don't have the issues with the Church of Satan. But then again, the Church of Satan doesn't worship Satan.
No, I know. That's the beautiful part about it. It's adversarial to
Let's
everybody.
be honest. The name Church of Satan
It's
and
they're
Satanic
trolling the
Temple
Christian
is-
church.
yeah,
That's
it's
what
a
it is.
deliberate-
That's what I like about
It's
it.
a middle finger to Christianity,
Yes.
organized religion in general, and Christianity in particular.
It's the first trolling. It was the trolling that happened in the 60s.
Trolling's older than that.
Yeah, but it was the first trolling that was mainstream. Played them at their own game. Name another religion that was invented specifically to be adversarial to another.
I was going to say Scientology, but that was founded on a bet.
Yeah, Scientology was founded on a bet.
Although, from setting everything else aside, having studied that story as much as I love it, there's some serious doubt among historians that it was actually... The story of the bet is probably apocryphal.
Yeah, I don't doubt that, but...
Although it is very much something I could... I don't know that much about
sounds
L.
like
Ron
L. Ron
Hubbard. It does sound very much like Robert Heinlein, which is the man he's supposed to have made the bet with.
Yeah, go figure.
And for that matter, Heinlein did start his own religion, or did help start another religion,
Well,
which was a lot more tongue-in-cheek.
let's to get back up on topic here a little bit.
Yeah.
In what ways can we say that these end times will take form? Because I'm pretty damn sure not everybody thinks that it's all going to happen exactly the same way.
Exactly, they don't.
I'd love to hear some of these.
Most of the realistic
sure
ones
you all
are
would
pretty dramatic.
Right.
Again, if you literal readings of interpretation of prophecy, and some of them go that way, you're talking about armies of demonic horsemen that kill half the world population, locusts, and this is one of the ones I find the most interesting, just because of one of the ways I've seen it interpreted. So there's a prophecy about these locusts that they don't look like normal locusts. They have human faces, horse-like bodies, scorpion tails that fly around and attack unbelievers. But specifically what's so interesting is it says that in those days there will be those who seek after death, and death shall flee from them. Now, the traditional way of interpreting this would be the way that you find in the Left Behind novels, and oh boy do I have more to say about that.
Oh, don't even go there.
Which is that basically people will want to commit suicide, and either the pain will be too great, or they'll try to commit suicide and they won't die. What my preferred interpretation of it is zombies.
Why did I think you wouldn't go there? Of course you were going to go there.
The Walking Dead interpretation.
Walking Dead, for that matter, the original Night of the Living Dead, it isn't necessarily a virus. One of the original explanations for what's going on is when there's no more room in hell.
Yeah.
That's just it. Hell is just one gigantic queue line at the DMV. It's never going to run out of room.
In a giant circle, no
Of
less.
course it is. Now serving number... But
666 million. Oh, wait, you filled out the form wrong. Back to the beginning.
Yep, we wanted it in triplicate.
Yep.
Yes, that will always happen. But, if you want to talk about when it comes to that, I got the perfect way to prevent death in that case. Surround yourself with nihilists inside of a fallout shelter and wear a beekeeper suit.
Okay.
There you go. You've avoided the locusts. You're in a fallout shelter, which means you've got consistent recycled food, water, okay? And if you surround yourself with nihilists...
interpretations, because there are interpretations that these locusts are actually helicopters, because the wing, the wings being the rotors.
But
and there are interpretations that there's some sort of genetically modified organism, of course.
good luck.
There's the more fantastical, less remotely scientific explanation that no, they're just demons.
Yeah, that's why you hide out in a fallout shelter, surround yourself with nihilists so that the horsemen of death will not come near you. That's it.
Well, it's not death. They're not led by death. They're led by Apollyon, the angel of the bottomless pit, which means the fallout shelter isn't going to help you.
Yeah, but why is he going to come after you? You're surrounded by people that he runs from. He sees, he runs.
Well, we are at the half-an-hour mark, so I do want to give out the phone number.
There you go.
Although you did bring up another excellent point to get into. So 609-807-2492, 609-807-2492. But the point you bring up is the four horsemen of the apocalypse.
Me, and me.
Well, here's one. Brian, this is pop culture. You might know it. What are the names of the four horsemen?
War, famine, pestilence, and death.
You agree with him?
No.
What are they then?
War is actually named conquest.
Close. Very close.
Dang it. I think pestilence is called something else. Famine is called decay. Or something to that degree.
Okay, now you're sorry, dude.
Yeah, now I'm shooting in the dark.
So, war is in fact war. Famine is famine. Pestilence is not an independent horseman. He's combined with famine. Death is death. Conquest is so you have 4 horsemen on 4 obviously 4 horses.
I know the colors
The
too.
first horseman, the one on the white horse
Is death.
is conquest.
The pale horse.
The pale horse is death. The white horse is conquest. It's a mistranslation of the word. I'll get to that in a second.
Uh-huh.
So the Bible says that it's a figure that rides a white horse, carries a bow without a bow, but there's no mention of arrows, which is why it's often interpreted as a political leader. In fact, a lot of people who study this stuff believe that the white horseman is in fact the Antichrist. An alternate explanation is that he's Christ, because the reason for the divergent point is the Bible also says that when Christ comes back, he comes riding a white horse.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that the 4 horsemen themselves, they're not villains. They're just there to institute policy.
They've
all.
also been interpreted and where the war, famine, pestilence, death comes from that most people think of.
Yeah.
I forget who wrote, but there was a political commentator who commented that basically they're the four basic means of population control.
Makes
War,
sense.
disease,
Famine and
famine,
death.
and death. So the second horseman is the red horseman, is
War.
war. The third horseman, the black horseman, is famine.
Mm-hmm.
The final horseman is
Green.
Yes.
Yes.
It's translated as pale. It actually would more accurately be green. Specifically, it's the sickly green of decay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's death. And just to make that even more fun, hell rides after him.
Yep.
Actually, wasn't the quote, Behold, I
Technically,
saw upon a pale horse, and upon him was death? Pale.
Pale, yes.
Green, not pale.
But the
Pale
pale is a
green.
mistranslation.
Ah.
Again, it's pale in the sense of decay, of the dead,
All right.
which would actually be more accurately more of a sickly green color than a white.
Yeah.
White, and you're not. It's not an unfair error to make, given a lot of pop culture lately has turned the white horseman into death. Particularly Sleepy Hollow, which got so many things painfully wrong.
I like this. I like
Supernatural.
Supernatural's death better.
Yeah, Supernatural's death is a lot of fun.
Yeah. What was it? A Chrysler. It was not a Chrysler. I forget what it was called. A Bel Air.
Yeah.
It was a white Bel Air with a license plate that said "Bye Bye."
But yep, the thing I liked best about him is his theme song,
Oh yes. Oh.
which is an old spiritual actually.
Yeah.
That they added a little more music. You know, it was originally spiritual. They added more music to it, and they used it for the show, and it is phenomenal. I love that character. Supernatural took a lot of liberties with the apocalypse, with everything.
Yeah.
Well, it's an apocalypse every other season. I mean,
Well, the Christian
Come on.
Apocalypse is only season 5. They just added a whole bunch of other ones.
yeah.
I enjoyed the show. I'm not bad mouthing the show,
It's great.
but it has definitely that issue of one-upmanship. That they always have to have a bigger threat. You know,
Yes.
we did the Christian Apocalypse. Well, now what? Well, what if it's God's first creation, the Leviathans that are coming back?
Sure, why not?
What if it's God's sister? What if it
Okay.
says what if it's that? And it's
The
like,
darkness before the light. Why not?
And with the latest season, they've added yet another creature of the mythology.
Nephilim.
No, Nephilim's has been around for a while.
Just for the last. Well, yeah, it got mentioned first. I think in season 5, but then
well,
a
you
key
see one in
character
season
became
6.
one.
In season 13.
Yeah, it's season 13. It became a focus.
But season 14, they've added something older than God and Death and the Darkness.
You see my question marks on my forehead?
You need to catch up.
Oh, yeah, I do.
And I don't want to get into greater detail because I don't want to spoil it for any of our listeners.
Spoilers,
Or
spoilers,
Beth,
spoilers.
who I know hasn't seen, is way, way, way behind.
Yes, she is.
But, well, actually, that's something else worth talking about. So I've mentioned the Antichrist a couple of times now. Let's talk about the Antichrist.
Right.
For a start, the term Antichrist is only used 3 times in the Bible. None of them are in the Book of Revelation.
Right.
In fact, depending on how you read it, the time when Antichrist is used, it's not talking about one guy. It's talking about the spirit of Antichrist, and there's a strong implication that it's many people. It's people that oppose Christ, oppose his message, and oppose the chosen people of God, the Jews. I would argue, based on my reading of it, there have been many antichrists. There is the beast, which we're getting to because there's a progression. There's a madness to my method, a method to my madness.
Understood.
But Nero was certainly, Nero, who was one of the worst in the way that he treated the Christians,
Caligula
was Antichrist. Caligula was Antichrist. Hitler was Antichrist. Look at how he treated the Jews.
Yeah.
There are many people that fit this role. But there's also the beast, which is the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. And upon the 10 horns is a crown, and on the heads is a blasphemous name. And this is when most people say the Antichrist, when you go see the movie The Omen, or any of the millions of other ones like it, and they talk about the Antichrist, the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns is the beast they're talking about, which is a giant creature that rises out of the sea. Prophecies, very open interpretation. My personal opinion on how this is going to go down, if and when the Antichrist shows up, he's going to rise out of Europe. He's probably going to be of, or claim to be of, Roman descent. Because most of the prophecies suggests that the center of power for the beast is Rome, is what was once the Roman Empire. I think he will also claim, although I'm certainly not going to say he will actually be, to be of Jewish descent. And I think, here's the big departure from most way people think about this, interpret this. I think he'll start by claiming to be a Christian preacher.
Interesting.
Definitely a political leader, but I think he'll openly espouse. What'll start out as sounding because he's supposed to sway a lot of people, and be so persuasive he can nearly deceive people that are supposed to know better. What's called the elect. And if somebody's going to come out and pull the wool over even the Christians' eyes, at least for a while, they're going to come out and he's going to talk a lot about peace. And he's going to bring peace. Most interpretations say he's going to bring peace. He's going to sign a peace treaty, which the Bible says there's a peace treaty that's made with Israel that'll last a week. Every interpretation I've ever seen of it is that the week in this case actually means 7 years. But he's going to come out looking like a nice guy. And realistically, the devil's smart. The devil is not going to come out, the devil's chosen representative is not going to come out and go, I am Satan, I fear me at first. He's going to come out and act like a nice guy. He's going to come out and make everything seem very reasonable.
It's the quiet ones you look out for, not the mass murdering psychopaths.
And if you want an example of my point, when he first got started, Jim Jones was a respected civil rights attorney. He did a lot of good for people. He fought segregation.
He was the first. He was the first family to actually adopt an African American child in Illinois.
And he adopted Korean children and Chinese children.
Yep.
He had what he called his rainbow family, which were children from all these different cultures that he adopted. And he talked about how the fight for segregation was personal to him now because he wanted his children to have the advantages. A less extreme because he didn't lead to the death of millions. Or, excuse me, thousands. 900,000. 900,000 people died.
9,000.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry, 9,000 people died. A lot of people died at Guyana.
In Jonestown.
Jonestown was in Guyana, which is why I call it Guyana. But a less extreme example that is also an example of the point. When he got his start, Fred Phillips was also a civil rights attorney.
Mm-hmm.
He did he also fought very hard for equal rights for black people and for all the horrible things that the Westboro Baptist Church does. It is very strongly and loudly against racism against black people.
Mm-hmm.
They're anti-Semitic, but they are not. Racism outside of anti-Semitism is something they very strictly, very loudly oppose.
Right.
Along with their insane treatment of homosexuals.
I'm not even going to go there.
Yeah. And you look at how many serial killers. He was such a nice boy.
Mm.
How
Very quiet.
yes, very quiet. Hitler, when he started out, people liked him. People agreed. People agreed with him.
Yeah.
The Jews weren't even his first target. His first target was disabled people. Was getting people with the logic of we're getting people out of the workforce who can't work. And when he did go after the Jews, it was someone everyone hated. People went along with it. People thought it was reasonable.
Well, we know that apparently the apocalypse is heralded by some form of an Antichrist or another. I presume that this is kind of universal amongst all other types of doomsday prophecies. There's always a central figure that seems to kick it off.
Judaism has a figure of this sort too. Islam has a figure like this. Most religions I know, I'm not by any means, and I'm not an expert on Christian end time prophecies. I'm certainly not an expert on other religions' end time prophecies. But from what I know, most of them seem to have this idea of a centrally evil figure,
right,
that organizes the world. The Bible gets quite colorful with him ultimately leading all of the armies of the world to the plain of Megiddo in Israel,
right,
and then declaring war on God when Jesus shows up. I'll say a couple. Megiddo is an actual place. It's where we get the name Armageddon. It's a giant plain in the Middle East, separated by, I believe it's the Tigris River, that again in prophecy says will dry up just in time for this battle. And funny enough, Napoleon once commented that it was the perfect place to fight a battle while traveling through the area. But where was the place I was going with this line of thought?
You were going to Megiddo. Zing. See? Now he's Armageddon.
But that's where I was going. So another thing I wanted to particularly comment on, because in light of Jehovah's Witnesses, and they're not the only ones, but there are people all over the world, even in the United States, there are people that claim they are the reincarnation of Jesus Christ, the prophesied second coming. Where it gets really strange is some of them call themselves the Antichrist, but they claim that the term was misunderstood, that it's actually the second coming of Christ.
Talk about twisting things and getting your marketing twisted.
Yeah.
Just a bit.
But there's a point about that I wanted to make as well. So there's two times, essentially in most interpretations, there's two times Jesus comes back. The first time is in fact invisible, and is what people call the rapture.
Right.
There's a shout of an archangel, there's the sound of a trumpet, which has since been associated with the archangel Gabriel. The Bible doesn't say it's Gabriel, just as the shout of an archangel and the sound of a trumpet. And in front of the Bible never actually calls Gabriel an archangel. The only angel in the Bible that gets that name is Michael. And all of those faithful to Christ vanish, starting with the dead, those who are already dead. The bodies disappear. This has been led to this idea that is the basis of the original Left Behind novel and the Thief of Night movies back in the 70s, and dozens of other things called the Rapture, which is not a term that appears in the Bible. It was something from the 19th century. But there's a whole ton of argument about that, because the way that most people interpret it today, that's become very, very popular, is there will be this great rapture, all the Christians will vanish in the twinkling of an eye, and Jesus, it'll happen like a thief in the night. No one will see it coming. Which again goes to the whole, you're not going to know when the end comes. And then all the beast will take his throne, and there'll be the 7 years where everything will go sideways, the 4 horsemen will ride, and then eventually there's the final battle at well, the second to last battle at Megiddo, because again, there's another whole thing with the devil coming back again.
Mm-hmm. The devil
There's
2,
other people
Electric
that
Boogaloo.
think it's halfway through this 7-year period that the rapture happens. Some people think the rapture happens at the very end of it. Some people don't think there's a rapture at all.
Mm-hmm.
But when Jesus comes back for good, which is what the Jehovah's Witnesses meant about 1914, it's what the various the people that claim to be Jesus arguably mean. The Bible says he will split the eastern sky and every knee shall bend. So I will say this. If you want to know for sure that Jesus is back, look east. If you don't see something huge and dramatic that everyone on the planet can see simultaneously, he isn't back yet.
You look east, you might see somewhere out in Jersey Snooki actually having an intelligent thought. That's how you know the end times are near.
And it's another thing related to that is that the Bible does predict, and this one is all around us, and has been since the time of Christ easily, is lots of people will come and claim to be the Messiah.
Duh.
And every time, because I had somebody a few years back, right when I first started the YouTube series, contact me and say, "Hey, do you know about this guy in Florida who claims to be Jesus?" The guy didn't say he claimed to be Jesus; he said he was Jesus. I'm like, no, he's not.
Oh boy.
And he claimed to be Buddha too.
Oh, good. You might as well cover that.
Might as well do the twofer.
Well,
Yeah.
which, in fairness, in Eastern religions, that's not that uncommon.
Mm-hmm.
There are Buddhists that believe that Jesus either was the reincarnation of Buddha. For those that, like, the Tibetans that believe that Buddha keeps coming back as the Dalai Lama.
Mm-hmm.
There are ones that think he wasn't Buddha himself, because traditionally, if you go by what Buddha himself said, Buddha doesn't come back. Once you reach that state, you're done. You've ascended to nirvana. You're beyond the cycle of karma and the need for reincarnation. But there are what they call bodhisattvas, which are other learned people that have also attained enlightenment. And some Buddhists believe Jesus was a bodhisattva. In Hinduism, there is the god Vishnu, who periodically incarnates into the physical world as various people. The most famous person being also worshipped as god Krishna, which, yes, is the origin of the Hare Krishna group. And they believe that Jesus is another incarnation of Vishnu, just like Krishna was, which also is a whole other rabbit hole with people that think that the Christian, basically the radical sect of Jews in the first century, borrowed the idea of Krishna out of Hinduism, slapped in some Buddhism, and came up with Jesus. Whole cloth. But we're not going there. If you're interested in the whole was Jesus Krishna, Buddha, or various pagan deities, go to the channel. There's already plenty of videos on there. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. We've done it enough, thank you.
Yes.
And
all right, so you got the Antichrist, the central figure.
Yep.
He pops up, all right? Some chaos ensues. I'm sure this chaos takes on various forms, all right? You've already stated in one particular bit, or rumor of war.
Which is the other thing people are constantly pointing to and saying.
It's
See,
war.
the end is here. There's constant wars and rumors of wars. And has been for thousands, since before the time of Christ.
Exactly.
Natural disasters, a particular one that people will point to, is the Bible does talk about an earthquake. I've seen it interpreted as the entire world having an earthquake simultaneously, which would violate everything we know about plate tectonics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And physics.
Yeah. But, it's dramatic, it's obvious. And the other thing is, people have this idea, and it's worth squashing, given this is more about relax. This is less about it's the end of the world and more about relax. It's not the end of the world. But there is this idea that there's been a huge increase in earthquakes. It's not true. What has happened recently is, one, humans are bloody everywhere, which means when there's an earthquake, there's more likely than ever before in human history somebody there to notice there's an earthquake happening.
Yeah.
And our scientific ability to detect earthquakes and detect when earthquakes happen has also vastly improved.
Not to mention there's also the concept of confirmation bias.
Yes.
Severe confirmation bias.
Which is, I think, across the board what happens with a lot of these prophecies. is if you go looking to fit the prophecy, it's real easy to go, we are living in the end times. That is why people have been constantly saying this for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Personally, I think when God lets the other shoe drop, I'm inclined to think he's going to wait till at least 10 years have passed before anyone said the world's going to end, and then it's going to happen.
Good
just
luck.
to get all the people that are convinced that the world's going to end.
Yep. I think if anything, there's going to be a rock. It's going to come from the sky. And we're not going to know that it's actually going to hit us until we take one look and be like, that thing's getting mighty close.
Which is also in the Bible.
Yep.
Or
Big-ass rock is going to hit us.
Something here, yeah. Well, the Bible calls it a star. A little more logically, it would be an asteroid or
the moon.
Or the moon. Would
moon
be
is getting
unlike,
closer to us.
Actually, it's getting further.
It's getting further, and then I forget what the
It's gradually going further away.
It's going further away
very
and then it's
slowly,
and then it's going to start to come back.
I don't know. All I know is it's moving. Currently, moving away from us ridiculously slowly. It's centimeters a year.
Yeah.
Which is not going to come. The only time I would say with a degree of likelihood the world is going to end is going to be in around 4.5 billion years when the sun goes supernova.
There you go. That's when everybody burns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if anything, the initial flash of the
we'll be dead before the actual explosion. Long before the actual explosion.
I don't know. Human race has the ability to survive everything. Take a look at this. We survived November back 2 years ago.
Most likely. No. What I specifically mean is,
well,
humans may still be
we
around.
Still haven't yet.
But more likely, I think we'll have gone somewhere else in the universe if we're still around at all. But the reality is, before the star finally explodes, there's going to be massive amounts of radiation and heat. The star is going to swell. Before the final boom that turns it into a supernova, I think it actually expands.
I mean, the swell.
Out.
Yeah, the swell is, we're going to die before the swell happens because that the shock of the disbalance just before the swell is going to be what
also, the
torches
swell
us.
eventually reaches our orbit.
Oh, yeah, within like a couple of seconds, it's going to hit us.
All right, well, I should
we're just
note
about
that
the
we're
end.
getting close to the end, so...
Should I speak about our second sponsor?
Yes.
Oh, very well. Folks, I'm going to tell you this right now. A lot of us have internet browsing histories we don't want anybody to find. We don't want to get tracked, and we don't want to be able to, I guess you could say, leave a trail as to where we've been out in cyberspace. There's an actual company out there. It's called NordVPN. They hook you up, and believe it or not, you go through them, nobody's going to be able to track you. Nobody's going to be able to tell where you're at. They don't record it. And it certainly helps out whenever you're in certain countries that don't let you access certain websites here and there, like China or whatever. They literally will act as a proxy for you. You can say that you're going in from anywhere in the world. I saw one guy actually use this. He said that he put it in. He was able to post from Azerbaijan. Guy was in L.A.
Yep.
Okay? It masks where you're at so that this way you have a very strong layer of encrypted protection, privacy, you name it. You can't beat it.
Military grade.
Military grade without it. And this is coming from somebody that used to work DoD security. It's up there. So they've got going rates right now. The link is down below. Check it out. I guarantee you're not going to regret it. And if anything,
30-day money back guarantee. If you don't like it, return it, get your money.
Tell them Baron sent you.
And tell them that I sent. Well, actually, don't tell them I sent me.
So, there is a link. There are links in the description both for our audibletrial.com/paranormally, audibletrial.com/paranormally for NordVPN. Keep in mind, we still have our GoFundMe and our Kickstarter.
Yes.
Paranormal Encyclopedia on GoFundMe, Demonology on Kickstarter. We could definitely use your support. We're also selling ad space on eBay. Still, remember, it's $5 for a 30-second ad. You can start the bidding at $5 and go up to however high it goes, or you can just buy it right out at $60. It is it's a 30-second ad. And I will say there is no sneaky thing. I know some will do that. The reserve price of it says it starts at $5, but if you don't hit at least 30, you don't get anything. No. It's a bidding for a week, like most eBay things. At the end of the week, the highest bid gets a 30-second ad on the show.
And I guarantee you, I will use my most sultry and very convincing voice.
I will say, just keep in mind, this is not exactly a family-friendly show, but this is a religious theme show. So we don't do pornographic ads. We don't do We don't do political ads.
Oh, jeez, no.
Anything overly vulgar, feel free to contact me. If you have something you want to advertise but you're not sure, feel free to email me. My email is in the description below. We can talk about it. I'll let you know if we think it's okay or not. We can talk about what sort of ad you want and all that sort of happy thing.
Or just email us for the heck of it. We love fan
say
mail.
hello. Feel free to ask questions. Most importantly of all, if people out there listening to us now, if any of you have a problem with the paranormal, I am still an active investigator. We can help.
Yep.
If you live in PA, New Jersey, Delaware, or New York, I can come out in person. If you live further out, I can help you find a group that will help you. One of the most important messages of the show is always, no matter how bizarre what's going on in your house is, there is help. Don't give up hope.
Exactly.
But that's going to wrap it up for tonight. I want to thank you all for listening. This is Kevin Mears saying good night and God bless.
Brian McKinley saying keep your fangs sharp.
And Baron Voltage saying avoid lightning rods and please don't kill the guy that's coming down the chimney on the 25th.
Good
It
night,
might
everyone.
be me.
Night.